very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. What spurred that particular question to look into whether the president is actually following through on some of the recommendations that have been made by the SIU?
Aldrin, good morning. So what spurred the hearing itself is the fact that we've got two agencies that assist the Standing Committee on Public Accounts on an ongoing basis. It is the Office of the Auditor General, as well as a Special Investigating Unit. Now, over the last few months, we've taken several presentations from the SIU about various investigations which are either ongoing or have been completed. Every investigation is submitted to the president with recommendations. So it's important for a committee like ours to follow up to see if the presidency and various departments and other state agencies are implementing the recommendations of the Special Investigating Unit. So the whole hearing was about whether these are being implemented, are these being tracked, and so on.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask this also on the basis of what we've seen happen with the previous presidents as well, that sometimes that there is a recommendation that would come from the SIU on what steps that needs to be taken, and we are told that no decision was taken to actually lock up the report itself, and the report never sees the light of day. At least the public never gets to see the report. Are we seeing any difference, though, in how the current administration is dealing with the SIU reports compared to what has happened before with the previous administrations under different presidents?
Look, there is a difference, Aldrin, in the sense that the SIU has told us that they have not had a single proclamation application being turned down. They get processed relatively quickly, and there is an MOU between the SIU and the Department of Justice to process the proclamations, I think, within 30 or 60 days, which is very good to hear. But I think proclaiming is one thing, but making sure that what is recommended by the SIU is done is even more important. There's a particular problem, Aldrin, at a provincial and municipal level, as far as the implementation of recommendations is concerned.
Okay, speak to us about one of the things that has captured the audience is around the companies that have been implicated in the SIU COVID-19 investigations, 51 of them implicated but still doing business with the state.
Yes, it's not surprising, Aldrin, to the committee and to me in particular, because the government, firstly, there are areas of the government where the recommendations of the SIU and the Auditor General are routinely ignored, for instance, without consequence. So that is the first problem. But an even more insidious problem is the fact that the government does not have an integrated system where various government agencies can have access to the same information. You will recall the Aldrin that went before SCOPA and other committees and so on. The tragedy about failure to implement that system is that this problem would be eliminated if an employee of the government, a supplier, and so on is entered into that system, whether it's in a municipality, province, national government, or another government agency. That information would be available for anyone who needs to draw a report and has got authority to do so, and prevent them from doing business with the state. What's happening now is that the information has to be manually loaded by the agency concerned, and they just don't.
But I don't understand why such a system wouldn't be in existence. If we look, for instance, the story about, as an example, just a quick example, Edwin Sodi and his companies that were involved in the Hammanskraal, the Hammanskraal water situation in Hammanskraal, is that the point that was raised there was that a decision was taken that the company should be blacklisted and the municipality would be taking the information to Treasury, which means that there is a portal for companies that are blacklisted, or there should be a portal for companies that are blacklisted. But why wouldn't that be the case when it comes to companies that the SIU has red flagged?
So this is what happens. So the municipality has to load that information into the system, right? They don't. That's the problem. So they don't, because the system is not their own system. They've got to go onto another system. And that is different to the one where you load delinquent employees, for instance, who've been fired elsewhere. So if you go to the Department of Service Administration website, you technically can see I think there's about 12,000 names of people that have been dismissed and are not to be employed for the next 5 years. But that does not apply to municipalities, for instance. So somebody can be a rogue employee in a municipality in the Eastern Cape and go and do damage in the Northern Cape, and there'd be no consequence. The system that we're talking about, the IFMS, unfortunately was mired in controversy, much of it unnecessary because it's a massive contract. It was mishandled, and the government has botched it for 15 years. They started implementing it 15 years ago. It's still not there.
So what should the approach then be now going forward, specifically now dealing with some of these companies? Because I'm sure maybe some of them have already even tendered for government contracts and we received those contracts.
So what we've done is we've asked the presidency to go and draw more information for the committee about systemic changes they are going to make in order to start eliminating some of these problems. There are several problems in the system, Aldrin. The audit committees are useless. They don't work. The internal audit functions, a lot of the time, they are bullied and compromised, and you only rely on the Auditor General and the SIU after the fact to do that. So there's something about prevention that we've asked the presidency to come back in February to the committee to brief us on their plans and what it is that they're going to do about that. The second thing is just making sure on a quarterly basis that that dashboard is updated and submitted to the committee. So we're going to do ongoing monitoring to see if this is being implemented. And finally, next week we have the SIU, the NPA, and the Hawks in the same room because we want to know what has happened to all of the cases that were referred for prosecution. So that, again, we don't have agencies blaming each other in each other's absence. And from there, we're going to keep another dashboard again and make sure that we track each of those cases through the year.
Yeah, what should happen to companies that have been implicated by the SIU that are still doing work with the state?
So the procedure there is that those companies need to be brought before there is
Hi, Songezo, can you hear us?
That company is supposed to...
Okay, Songezo, sorry,
yes,
we lost you there for a second. You were saying the approach is?
Those companies go through a hearing, Aldrin. The state agency concerned is supposed to have the equivalent of a disciplinary hearing for that company. It starts with the agency asking that company to show cause in the face of the evidence why they must not be removed from the supplier database. They make a submission, and an internal panel then makes a decision about whether that company should stay or not. That is to make sure that the decision is not challenged in court as being irrational. So you give them an opportunity to make representations. What is not happening is that this disciplinary process is not taking place. And that is what the president is supposed to follow up on and come back to the committee on, because we want to be sure that those processes do take place.
Yeah. Should there be a public portal, though, also in relation to these companies?
Yes, that came up in the committee. It's not just those committees, it's also the employees, because the same person who's corrupt in government can go and work for a private company at the same time. So we want a portal where the public can see these companies and they can also see the people that have been exited for unethical or corrupt behavior.
Yeah, because the other thing is that one of the things is that you look for a job, you find a job only to find out that the company that has employed you is actually embroiled in corruption that taints your own reputation as well. But just finally on the point that you were raising a bit earlier on the IFMS, what should happen there to ensure that all the issues that have been dealt with, the issues that have been raised by the SIU, the issues that have been raised by the Auditor General are dealt with and the system then becomes smooth?
Sorry, Aldrin, we broke off there, but I think you were asking me.
Yeah, I was asking about the implementation of the IFMS. What do you think should happen now, considering the issues that have been raised by the SIU and the issues that have been raised by the Auditor General? Because it seems as though that the system is the right system.
No, it absolutely is the right system, Alderton. Look, we are going to call the Minister of Finance to come before the committee next year. Once the budget process, what is happening with that system, it absolutely must be implemented, especially given the delays that we've had. It's going to take years, Aldrin, to be honest. It's going to take about a decade to implement, but I think it needs to start now.
It needs to start now. Thank you so much for your time. That is the SCOPA Chairperson there, Songezo Zibi, on their investigation with the revelation from the SIU that 51 companies implicated in the COVID-19 scandals are still doing business with the state, and they haven't been deregistered or not been restricted, rather, from doing business with the state.